ahead and call the meeting to order. Start with a roll call. McKee here, Lanterman.
Here.
Friedrich.
Here.
Marinkamp.
Here.
Nichols.
Also here.
Perfect. And then we'll go on to the work session item, Northwest District Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a large staff presentation, so I feel that this meeting was more meant to be a discussion. So just to kind of kick things off, on August 13th, the City Council expressed a desire to hold a work session to discuss our Northeast District Plan, to discuss challenges and the value, particularly as it relates to the Ebert property, Springs development at County Road 30 and County Road 101, as well as the Oswald property immediately west. Further, this was seen as a potential opportunity to hear from the Springs development directly as it relates to some infrastructure requests that they had submitted in an email a couple weeks ago to the city for the council to consider. So staff is here. We have planning, parks, and engineering staff here to answer questions that you may have on our Northeast District Plan. I can go through any images that you'd like. Just let me know and I can pull that up. Otherwise, let us know what you'd like to discuss.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Just to put the cart before the horse, so to speak, and such, is there any responses from the county on County Road 30 and possible changes sooner than later? Or is it one of those things we've got to build before, if I can ask that question?
So Mayor and Council, I have an appointment with Lisa Cerny of the county tomorrow, and so I'll be meeting with her tomorrow at I think 10:30. Staff has continued to meet with them and impress upon them our concerns regarding this corridor, particularly the transportation concerns, and I think that this is their response. Okay. So Lisa, I don't recall her official title, but I would put her as the head of the transportation.
And again, our interest, or the only interest I would have, is it would be nice if we didn't just add turn lanes and stuff. It'd be nice if they could engage somewhat with the property owners along that property, that stretch. It's just a mile of road, and to just add turn lanes for very shortly thereafter to all of a sudden tear it all up and redo it. It sure would be nice if they could acknowledge something and talk about it instead of just doing it halfway.
To clarify her official title, she's the Assistant County Administrator for Public Works.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Just my thoughts. This is an extremely important area, and our comp plan has been set this way for a long, long time. And the poor communication between the state and the county related to the dumping 610 on the Rush Creek Boulevard, County Road 30, whatever we call it, it just doesn't seem very responsible on their part. So, thank you. I voiced my concern.
One concern I remember expressing when the concept came before council last time is a desire to see a concrete plan for how the commercial portion of the site would develop. And for me, that was important because we know we have a desire to expand the tax base. And I felt there was risk if we allow a development to proceed with only a residential component when a commercial was also required by the zoning, that we may find ourselves holding a bag where that land never develops in the way that we had originally planned it to develop, and we get a request 5 or 10 years down the road to convert it to more residential. And so before we get into details of requests from the residential portion of the development, I'd like to get an update on what we know or suspect about the commercial prospects for the site and when we would know more.
So feel free to jump in since you're the planner on the Springs project. But I will say that was heard, that comment was heard. That was something that staff continued to work with the applicant team on to define that area for the preliminary plat application. So we do have plans that do have that carved out, have some commercial lots for us to evaluate for viability as the preliminary plat application were to proceed, along with some concept building plans. So So I would say it is still concept in nature as it would be at this point. I would say even Hope, which had that much more integrated at the beginning of their application, I would say that that commercial area is still somewhat concept level just because as we get a specific user, the needs may change somewhat. So I think they're on track. I don't know if you disagree with that at all, but from what we haven't completed the planning review at this point because it is a complete application, but there was a number of plans that we had asked for ahead of completing the staff review. So as terms of the actual viability of the sites, I don't know that we are able to speak to that today, but they're on the right track as to meet that objective.
Okay. Could you compare and contrast, you mentioned Hope, which I think is a really good example because they did get approval for a mixed site under a PUD that included low-density residential and commercial in the same plan. And we didn't express concern about the commercial being delayed in that case. Can you speak to the differences between how we approached that development and what the code requirements are for mixed use in this area?
So I would say the difference between that development and this development has just been the integrated component from the beginning.
Yeah.
Hope came to us with a concept plan where a main anchor of their vision was medical office building that they wanted to include in addition to having a variety of life cycle housing that met different needs at different stages. So they had a very integrated vision when they came to us, whereas I think when this vision on this site first came to us, it was much more focused on just the residential, not wanting to put a whole bunch of time on the commercial at this point. But when as Hope was moving through the project, they were providing us with concept building paths. They were providing us with how they expected the lots to be drawn. And we're getting that from the applicant too. We've really been using Hope as the framework as to what we expect from future mixed-use applications.
Okay. And the GMU district that Hope had prior to PUD, I don't think has the same kind of 50-50 anticipation of mix between residential and non-residential that mixed use does?
So they're both general mixed use. Both sites are general mixed use.
Okay.
All of our mixed use per comp plan expects an overall that 50% of the acreage that is developable within mixed use will develop for residential. We did provide some flexibility with Hope, and we did that intentionally, and when we did that, we also said that means we might not be able to be as flexible with other users later on. We've already kind of gone a little over the anticipated acreage. So that was something that we had talked about and intentionally decided. Okay. So, and I would say this application too is a little bit above the 50% acreage going towards residential with less developable acreage going towards the commercial. So again, we can do that, but then I would say as south of 30 starts to come in, we're gonna really need to start, we're either gonna have to reevaluate the residential that we're anticipating in a mixed use, or we're really gonna have to start making some decisions as to whether or not we're meeting the objective of that district with applications that come in.
Okay, thank you.
Mark?
Thank you. This application was received February 17th, I think. What's the status of the 60-day clock? Is that even a consideration in this? Where are we on that? And it kind of sounds like you deem the application as incomplete. Is that correct?
I can speak to that. So
Okay.
The application is deemed complete, but there are a number of items that need to be adjusted before we can have staff recommend approval for it. Items such as infrastructure, the turning movements on the county road, stormwater drainage, a number of items like that that needed to be addressed before we felt that this was an application that could be presented to council with staff support. And so we communicated that with the applicant. They heard that, and right now, initially, the application was deemed complete on May 17th. There was a 120-day review period that was extended by the applicant. So right now, the review period is set to expire on, it's in November sometime. Unfortunately, I can't find it on this sheet, but it should be middle of November.
Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Natalie.
I was just going to clarify, so essentially, with what we have right now, if we don't receive an additional extension from the applicant, the application would have to move forward no matter what in October, unless it's withdrawn or extended. And at that point, with the information we have, it's possible that it might be with a staff recommendation to deny at this time. Because there's some significant information that we just, it hasn't been figured out. So even though we have the complete plan set, there's information we're missing within the plan set. So they can, if they were to resubmit some of that before October, it's possible that that staff recommendation would deny, but that's just kind of a wrap. We're kind of at a bit of a standstill with missing some information that's critical to be able to have a staff consensus that we recommend approval. But not that they haven't been working on it.
Sure.
But as of things right now, it would be anticipated that October, it could potentially go forward. Some of that's up to the applicant.
So even though it's deemed complete, you're still waiting on some additional information, but do we have any issues with that 60-day clock?
So the city had a 120-day period for review. That's what we're entitled to. The applicant is able to extend that. I'm sorry. The applicant is able to extend that. There's no limit to how many times the applicant can request to extend the deadline. The city can't further extend the deadline. So it might get into a position, not necessarily with this application, but any application, we might get into a position where, well, you haven't extended it further. We have so many days left within what's already been allowed for the review period. We have to move forward, and unfortunately that may mean that either there's going to be a significant amount of conditions because we're missing information, or it would be a staff recommendation to deny. And we really thought it was more prudent with this application, considering its scope, that we all be on the same page before it goes to Planning Commission and City Council.
Yeah, thank you. This is helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Jay or Natalie, you guys had mentioned that there is some infrastructure questions from the applicant and such for us, or?
Yes, there was an email that was sent to Jay that I believe was shared with council that had a number of, that discussed some of the limitations they're facing related to infrastructure and some potential strategies that they're proposing.
Right.
That staff would not be able to, this would be direction that would have to be set by council because it completely deviates from our processes. I think, are you pulling that up, Jay?
I'm looking for it.
Okay.
Yep.
It's also in the packet too.
Oh, it's just split up.
Okay, one second.
So yeah, it's in the packet. It's just, is that a discussion we want to have, can have?
I believe that was part of the scope that was identified for this meeting.
Okay.
And I believe the applicant team is here too, if you want to speak with them directly. But essentially, and feel free, applicant team, to correct me where I may misstate something in the summary, but essentially, the roundabout that is anticipated to be required or other intersection improvement are County Road 30 and Elm Lane. It has a significant cost tied to it, so they're asking for some flexibility in meeting the infrastructure needs for this area so that they can afford to pay for that. Some of the proposals they had was to reduce the internal roadway network, such as removing 102nd Street, the new east-west connection to the business park and Elm Lane, and then or reducing applicable impact fees to help create additional financial capacity for the intersection improvements on County Road 30. So those were the two proposals they had. That would be in conflict with the getting rid of the internal road network would be in conflict with our Northeast District Plan. It would be, would also be in conflict, I believe, with the mixed use component. So it's supposed to be a walkable, integrated community. So having it be an isolated community right in the middle between the commercial area and the potential business park parcel to the west seems to be at conflict with the goals of the general mixed use district.
And what's sad in my mind is that one applicant would pay for the infrastructure for that intersection. I'm not gonna say roundabout, lit, or anything. They get nothing back if the other properties all of a sudden jump and say, hey, I want in now that
Yeah.
somebody else has paid for it. That's not right.
I could not
Right?
agree more. That's the process that
I
we're
know.
left with at this point. We could certainly talk as a city about an assessment to those other property owners.
That
In the
when
past,
they-
we have not entertained.
That
those
when they
funds.
develop, they pay.
No, it
their
would be
share
more, we go
or-
ahead and do the project, and there is, potentially is a gap that the city would have to pay for.
Yeah.
And then the other property owners that benefit from the improvement would be assessed. It wouldn't necessarily be a deferred assessment.
Oh,
that-
it'd be right away kind of deal.
Potentially, I don't know exactly how that would work, but there's,
So if I can speak a
Go
little
ahead.
bit more to that. So one of the challenges in deviating it has been the practice of the city, the phrase that development pays for itself.
Yep, yep.
And this is an example of some of the consequences of that when you have really costly infrastructure that is going to benefit adjacent properties, but we haven't been leveraging any of the possibilities to claw some of that back. So I've talked with, I think, most of you about the doors that we have to consider of potentially responding to this. One is the status quo, which has been that practice of development pays for itself. Another one is to consider some alternatives, and Natalie considered one of those, some tools that are often trying to attract development in commercial and industrial areas, which include tax increment financing, abatement, or leveraging special assessments in order to do that. One of the challenges with the special assessment framework would be that the city currently doesn't carry a cost associated with some of these developments. This would require the city, in order to carry a significant cost, and then potentially recoup some of that cost later in the future. That would leverage it out to make it more fair, but those property owners that aren't at a place for development or selling right now don't really have the resources at this point in order to do that, so it would probably be a deferred assessment for a window of
Right.
time. And then another one would be to reframe our policies and look at some other alternatives.
I think in a meeting that we had one-on-one, I remembered a agreement we made with Lennar when they were building Tavera, where there would be, I think they called it a recapture provision in the development agreement, where if additional properties that would be benefited by the utility connections, it wasn't roads, it was, I think, sewer and water connections, if those were to develop in the next 10 years, then Lennar would get a credit based on what those properties were required to contribute to the city. That might be an intermediate step, but that still maintains development pays for itself, but future development can compensate the developer for common shared infrastructure. Is that available to us in a case like this?
For transportation corridors, no. Recapture agreements exist for the utility infrastructure like you talked about, but until the legislature changes the law, we don't really have a mechanism to recoup that related to transportation corridors.
Is a utility implementation of that already on the table for this development?
so I think one complication is Pulte already did a recapture agreement for many of the properties that, if not all, do you know if it included south of 30?
Somewhat, but I would say the distinction for this property is we do those recapture agreements when it's off-site, like outside the plat boundary. All infrastructure on this proposal is within the boundary, so we give credits in that scenario, not recapture agreements. So there's some distinctions between sites, so.
Okay.
Legislatively, we can't do it for transportation. That's why if you look at our fee schedule, we don't have area fees. We only have them for utilities because that's statutorily allowed. But we can't have them for transportation. We've advocated with every developer in here that I go down and advocate for that because we feel like that is a more appropriate way to do it, but we don't have that legal authority to do it that way. So we're hamstrung with that option, unfortunately.
Okay.
I will note that there are several states that allow for a transportation area charge. Minnesota is one of the, I would say it's one of the few that don't have that as an option or a tool, and it is a severe limitation.
Yeah.
Puts the onus on the first one in, which we recognize, but we don't have another real way to do that without like an assessment that we just talked about, which
And that's, having worked for other cities, that's the way that they bridge that gap, is they do go to a special assessment philosophy, but there's a significant carrying charge on the city's part.
How long would you carry for in that scenario?
20 years.
I don't think we want to go down that route.
Yeah, or it could even be longer depending on what's happening for the development scenario for adjacent properties. So it's complicated.
Yeah. So I wouldn't advocate changing our overall position. I think TIFs and other similar mechanisms of deferring revenue growth really serve to counter our policy objective. I would be willing to think about, are there certain requirements that we could defer until the commercial develops, like portions of the road connections or things like that. I think it might be worth discussing other trade-offs. Like, I don't necessarily have a ton of investment in the idea of getting a gateway sign at this point. That might be something else that we would defer to the commercial. So I think it would be good to understand what are the relative costs and values of the different items that seem to be somewhat discretionary. And we can work through, as a council, what we would want to prioritize, if any.
In other words, what makes sense at the time of.
Yeah.
And then what else? I'd agree very much with that. I just, coming from spending 20 years next door and stuff, if I remember right, Maple Grove basically built Bass Lake Road. And the county said, we'll pay it back. I don't think they've paid it back yet.
That is an option in the council's, or Hennepin County's policy, but what the end result is that the municipality pays a significantly larger share of the overall improvement, and we are not, don't have the
we don't have
wherewithal of
those
Maple Grove.
resources. It was a different deal. It was about when Maple Grove hit about 45,000 folks. They just, the decision was made, let's just do County Road 10 all the way out.
And the cost share at the county would be reduced if the city let it. They would allow you to do that, but it does have a big financial impact on the municipality.
Maybe something good will come out of the conversation tomorrow, Jay, with what's going on. And has there been involvement of the other property owners along that corridor for now?
So my understanding is
conversation?
One of the advocates, one of the developers has been proactively trying to communicate with them. And it's important to remember that this is one corridor. That's not, our whole agenda tomorrow is also talking about the 1050 project, which is significant, what's happening on 101 and 116. So there's, this is one need of many needs when it comes to our transportation corridors within the city limits.
Yeah.
And some of those are, like in this case, it hasn't elevated to a safety concern. Unfortunately, that's what often as a reactionary organization, that's what gets the county's attention. And so we're also talking about the 30 and 19 corridor, but it's because of the longevity studies and all the significant problems that have happened, loss of life and significant accidents that have happened at the intersection of 30 and 19. We want to proactively avoid that, and but we're limited in what our alternatives are to help resolve that.
Yep.
And I
You were on the
I just want to say, just even if the county, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You're all right.
I would just say, even if the county, so the county has more recently gone to like a 5-year CIP plan where they identify projects and they start funding them and committing to them. And so, once you're on that list, you're starting funding, you probably have a realistic project within 5 years. They revisit that CIP plan every 2 years. They're in a cycle right now where they're revisiting the next 5-year plan. We're at staff and representatives and the mayor advocating really hard to elevate this section of roadway into that 5-year CIP plan. But even if it were adopted, say in 9 months, it will probably take 5 years to actually start a construction project. So that's the reality. And this is a significant corridor with a lot of complications with the high wire line. So I don't think it can't really be expedited faster than that in the county's process. So realistically, even if we convince them tomorrow, did the Houdini magic trick and got that, it would be 5 to 6 years before we could actually build a project through their process. So that's just realistic timelines that we're faced with. Now, I think if we got on my personal opinion, if we got on the 5-year CIP and they started planning the corridor, that would bring some assurances to the developer questions that aren't known today. So we don't want to stop advocating for that. That's what we can do, and we've had more recent success moving that. So that'll be a critical milestone for us if we can get on the CIP. But I just don't want to say that does solve problems, but in problems in 5, 6, 7 years, unfortunately. It would allow us maybe to pursue more grants through deed and other corridors of commerce. So once you start the snowball growing, you start acquiring more stuff in the process, potentially. That would also help. So I just say that to realize that it's a long play here, even, unfortunately for that investment that we need in this corridor. It's a long play for us, and that's just important to understand those realities.
And again, the reactionary.
Oh, go ahead.
The reactionary nature of the county. So 1050 has been problematic in terms of loss of life and significant issues along the 1050 corridor. 3 years ago, that wasn't in the 10-year CIP, and we were able to get enough attention to that, so it reached the feasibility study that they're working on this year. And so within the next 2 to 3 years, we were able to get that slipped into the 5-year. But what really was the catalyst for that was bad news. And that's what's horrible, but that's the reality in terms of what's been persuasive. And so we've had Commissioner Anderson here. I have had lots and lots of conversations, and I believe the only reason we've been able to get some of these projects into the CIP is Commissioner Anderson is advocating on behalf of Corcoran, but with competing needs, the fact that we've gotten something through is great, but the fact that we have all of these needs and they've been ignored is not.
And the item that we did get through is still going to be about a 5-year process.
Exactly.
So even if we were able to get County Road 30, if we were able to move that up to next year, we're still talking about 5 years before we're really at a point where construction is underway, almost complete. So just something to keep in mind. So even if we started tomorrow, it's
That would
going
be
to be at least,
optimistic.
right, 5 years is optimistic.
And then one last thing I'll add is even if the county were to fund that, they're looking at the through corridor, right? They're looking at the intersection, is it signed, what do you do with the signals? Do you expand the road, do you fix the shoulders, that type of stuff? What do you do with the intersection? And the developments that still have to address the connection. So it helps when you blend it together, to Councilmember Van Kamp's point about building turn lanes just to rip them up. So that's where it gets to, if they start getting a plan, you can start dialing in some better certainties with the timelines that make significant investments better, right? Uncertainty in the development world, that's my understanding, is harder than some sort of certainty, because the risk is what you're navigating on significant projects. So again, the county's really solely looking at through and the intersections primarily, and you still have to address the connections, which in and of themselves are significant. So it's kind of two parts when you talk County Road 30.
So
They both matter, but there's two kind of parts in the conversation.
If a developer put in, sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
Go ahead, you can finish this one.
It should, hopefully quick. If a developer put in a shoulder and they built their project and they're done, and then the county comes in 2 years later and their project is ready to go, does the county reconstruct the shoulder and the turn lane that was just put in, or is there some other entity that has to fund that portion?
They would, if it's approved, they would have to replace it.
Okay.
It would be a project cost. They don't want to necessarily do that either, but they're just, at the staff level, they can't, it's just a machine there, right, in terms of financing. But yes, to answer your question, if it was approved, they put turn lanes in or a temporary signal in lieu of a roundabout. There's different conversations to be had, but that, they would have to absorb that and replace that with the ultimate project, and that would be a project cost.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so my question is, when was the applicant made aware that they would be responsible for covering some of the roundabout fees or signal at that intersection?
When we completed the feasibility study, I don't know if we have the date, February-ish, early of this year.
Okay, and then in lieu of just reading the email that we received from them, like some of the suggestions they had for helping just alleviate some of those expenses, can we maybe just touch on some of those? I know we've had a discussion about how many exits or entrances safety-wise are needed for that development. But like in reading and learning more about their development, it seems like, and I don't know if there's something the city can do from that perspective, but like they necessarily don't want through roads. And so would it be less expensive, or could there be some savings if we didn't do some of those full extension roads all the way through their neighborhood from Bellwether?
So I will say that those roads from Bellwether down to 30 have been planned since before the Northeast District plan. Those were planned as part of Bellwether. The feasibility study was completed based on having that full access to internal road network, not having basically an isolated development within that. So I don't know that we've fully analyzed some of that, or we haven't, because that's not the framework that we've been working on for about the last 10 years. This is supposed to be an interconnected area for infrastructure, utilities, including utilities, as well as public safety needs, to serve not just this community that is coming in, but the larger area here on the northeast corner, County Road 30 and County Road 116. So as far as potential state, and the other thing too is when Bellwether came in, they wanted to also be a gated community. This community was, our city council at the time was very firm. They did not want it to be a gated community. When Springs came in, they first wanted to be a gated community. The message has consistently been that that's not something that we want in this area. So it would be a deviation from the feedback received to date. And about the last 10 years of planning to all of a sudden say we are okay with it being essentially an isolated gated community. As far as cost savings, theoretically, there could be some cost savings. Private roads do cost money. Private roads do end up having to be, there might be cheaper up front, but there's cost long term. I can't speak to their pro forma. Maybe it's easier for them to plan for that, but private roads also have other problems that come up that the city has. I think we've seen a couple of applications very recently where private roads have become very contentious issue within the communities. So in terms of being able to carry out what people think the city should be carrying out as their duty, because we can't even, we're not a part of the agreement. It's not in our purview at that point. Go ahead.
Could you bring up the graphic on page 6 of the packet, the Northeast District Plan that shows that layout of the road network?
Just real quick to that too, if I can. When I was in Bellwether at the 3 neighborhood communities meetings for Night to Unite, the number one thing that those folks talked about were the expectations of all of those roads getting put in. They had mentioned that they had signed documents related to the comp plan. They had signed documents related to a transportation plan. And that was their number one thing that the 3 Night to Unite meetings I went to, that was their number one conversation. When are we going to get more entrances that we were promised by the developer and the city? I don't think, but the expectation is, here's the transportation plan, when's it going to go in? And right now we've got documents in our meeting tonight about Hunter's Ridge being connected. That gives them 3 ins and outs. They're expecting that the inner group is where the 3 parties I went to. Those inner folks, that was their number one question. When are those 3 roads going to be connected to County Road 30? So
I guess
when I first,
my concern would be is like as our city continues to grow and we do get more traffic and County Road 30 becomes a busier highway and they extend the lanes, are we really going to want neighborhoods to be connected to a highway like that in the future, 10 years down the road?
So I think you're going to want some connection. Otherwise, the intersection, if you don't have some of these intersections to access the County Road 30, you're going to have major traffic problems.
But don't we
on
have
the other
4
intersections.
that would be connecting off of 30?
We are showing 2 in this, for this property, we're
It's
showing
the other
1.
side, though. So one thing I notice when I look at the graphic is that main road A that goes across on the north side of 30, where your cursor is now.
Yeah.
On the north side of 30, there are 4 spurs going north into low-density residential. But on the south side of 30, that blue line only has 1 connection coming south into the existing low-density residential.
Are we talking about this line?
Yeah. And so I'm curious why we felt we needed additional connections on the north side versus the south.
So I'm just trying to make sure I'm following. So this section right here was supposed to connect here. We ended up taking that out at the property owner's request at the last minute, saying we'll work through that at a later point because it would have basically, she was very concerned about the impact to her property, and that was just not something that I think council wanted to deal with in that moment. At the sacrifice of not adopting this plan at all. I think was basically, so it was a compromise. We're gonna show where the county has agreed we can get a connection point. But as far as the geometry of it, we're gonna let that play out at a later date. So that's why it's not showing that connection. As far as going to, these are all existing neighborhoods. So that's part of why we're not showing a new connection. We're not assuming that any of this is going to redevelop. That's all existing residential, and they don't have a connection today. But this is all developing, and this is where we were able to get the county to agree to access points based on their spacing guidelines. So that's what these are reflecting. So I can understand that it seems like, well, we don't need it down here, but this is also much lower density than what's anticipated up here. And also doesn't have commercial and industrial uses in this area. This is low-density residential, very low-density residential. And this is, I mean, we have 500 plus homes in Bellwether. If Springs were to move forward, that's about 300 units. And then we have several acres of commercial and industrial. So that's part of why there's much more traffic on this north side than the south side.
But don't we only have 3 Tavera connections in and out? There's one on 116, one on Hackamore, and then one on the backside. Would that be Trailhaven?
So some of that is based on the spacing guidelines with the county. So we get connections where we can based on spacing.
But that neighborhood is just as big. So my reasoning is if that neighborhood has 500 houses in it, it's almost the same size as what we're looking at here.
And I think it also, we should separate connections out to major county roads that are collectors and connections into residential streets. So I wasn't raising a point so much as to how many connections to the county road do you need. It's more how many connections do you need from that essentially frontage road into the low-density residential area.
Your question is how many local internal connections versus access to
Correct.
the broader system. I think piggybacking off what Natalie said is that these dark dashed lines are where we think a road should be. There could be more roads than that actually. And what when this was developed, the right-of-ways existed for Bellwether. So why is there 3 going to Bellwether to match those right-of-ways? Because that's how it's playing. Why is there 1 going to the south? Because there's only 1 right-of-way in that area outside of the wetlands. There's a lot of floodplain and wetlands down there. So the reason it's 4 versus 1 is simply the existing right-of-ways tied into when we develop this plan.
And also,
Just piggybacking why it shows 4 versus 1.
okay. The other thing to keep in mind is the mixed-use area is supposed to be a walkable destination area. So you do want more connectivity where you're assuming there's going to be more of a walkable destination district. And then with the commercial to the east, as well as the regional trail system and park system, those are just areas where people have more connections to be able to get to where they're going. And ideally, we have more people walking rather than using cars as they, that's the whole point of the mixed-use district, is to try to have that connectivity. So I would say that supported that long-term vision when that was established with Bellwether for those right-of-ways. Now, could we theoretically look at getting rid of 1? Potentially. I think what ends up happening is you might have 2 cul-de-sacs kind of abutting each other, and eventually someone's going to ask why
don't they
didn't
connect?
we just get that connected? So it's just, at this point, this is where, this is about, I want to say at least a decade of planning in terms of trying to figure out how we can have connectivity while balancing the different land uses. We can deviate somewhat. I would say infrastructure, I would be very hesitant to recommend deviating from infrastructure if we want to talk about flexibility for the application. I think things like the gateway sign, do we need all these PUD benefits that may also add costs in terms of the amount of landscaping and things like that? Maybe that's where we have more discretion without sacrificing infrastructure.
Again, Mr. Mayor, if I can, the expectations of many of the neighbors in the Bellwether area, that transportation plan that they included in their closing of their purchases and stuff. We had one over in Maple Grove, and I'm sorry, I spent 20 years over in Maple Grove trying to do this stuff right. But we had a road that was signed Future Road, okay? And the neighborhood came to the city, and the council and the mayor said, all right, after all of this, we're gonna close that road. One of the homes sold on that short little road, and a new buyer came in and ended up having a catastrophe related to the house and such. And there was delays of fire and police getting to that home. And it turned out to be a lawsuit of signed everything, future planned, and then they took it away. I don't want any of those implications happening to us as a city of, you know, poor planning, those kind of things. We've got a pretty darn good plan. It may vary a few 100 yards one way or another and stuff, but that those corridors, those easements, all of those things are extremely important, not necessarily to make traffic easier if 116 or 30 blocks up or 101, hey, let's cut through the neighborhood and do this. It's for public safety, and it's extremely important. And there's just so much. Nobody wants traffic through their neighborhood, but these are public streets, so.
Yeah, I think any changes that potentially could or would be made would have to be vetted thoroughly by public safety, and that could be the major veto tool, a change that maybe we all like. It would be if it's not feasible public safety wise.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on what Councilmember Varenkamp said. I've been doing a lot of door knocking lately, and in the neighborhood that I've been in is Maple Grove. So I had a great opportunity to see the roads in Maple Grove, and they do have some main streets, which is great, but they also have a fair number of cul-de-sacs that you go down, which I think is actually kind of nice because it gives the neighborhood more of a homey feel, and there isn't as much traffic going through.
But the cul-de-sacs back in the day, the longest cul-de-sac could be 1,200 feet. And that was related to, that's how much hose is carried on a fire truck. It's the maximum amount of hose for fire. So if there's a fire hydrant here, they can get 1,200 feet, and that was the rule back in those days. I think it's changed now significantly over there, but there are a number of cul-de-sacs that are about 1,200 feet long and not much longer.
Well, just because you have more entrances or more streets coming through a neighborhood doesn't necessarily make that neighborhood safer, just because you can get an emergency vehicle to it. If you have like young children in that neighborhood, depending on what the speed limit is or how fast people go, and if there's more ways to get into that neighborhood, it just creates more speed as people travel through there.
There's a trade-off of different kinds of danger.
Yes, of different safety issues. And to me, that's a bigger issue. And I know that Bellwether is 55 and older communities, but when you start looking at it as a whole, as we go forward and we have more developments, I feel like that's something that needs to be reviewed too, and not just how quickly can we get a fire engine in there. And I know that's important too, but at the same time, I think we need to keep our neighborhoods safe as well from that perspective.
Visibility to corners, intersections, people are going to be crossing, especially if they move slowly.
Fences and things like that, yeah.
All things I assume that our engineering staff and the folks that do the planning of these roads do for us.
Which I don't disagree with.
I don't think it's something we should be digging that deep in. Our public safety, our engineering staff, they do those designs, they do those things. And
It was a premier concern, if you remember, Mr. Espelin, was almost 2 years ago, came here and was actually asking for the connection that they're asking to not put in. He asked if the city would consider a right-of-way in order to get that connection to 30, very much for the first responder concerns that he was feeling with his neighbors at that time. Now, I don't want to speak for him now, but I just want to remind you that the issue that Councilmember Varenkamp was brought up by people in this neighborhood a year and a half ago.
One thing I will just add, it's not that you can't have cul-de-sacs. So the Northeast District Plan road network isn't necessarily showing all of the sub-roads. We're talking, these are the main connections, like in the district plan. There are some cul-de-sacs in Bellwether. Typically, you want to avoid cul-de-sacs for infrastructure purposes, but sometimes there's a reason. Sometimes the grading or the wetlands, or there's some constraint that really the cul-de-sac is very practical. But having a cul-de-sac just to have a cul-de-sac, you start to sacrifice some of the other efficiencies that come with not only public safety, but also just the infrastructure, viability long-term, not only the initial implementation, but repair costs and things like that going on. So it's just something to weigh. Like, it's
No,
not
I
that we
agree.
can't have cul-de-sacs. It's just,
So,
we're not going to show cul-de-sacs on the Northeast District Plan.
yeah. So like looking longer term, so we have all of these entrances onto County Road 30. Are we going to have stoplights at each of those entrances then? Because like I know what it's like to try to get onto 116 right now.
Dictated by the county.
It's almost impossible. And so like considering that, I feel like that's a big deal too, because now you're also creating another situation where it's not safe. Like I know in the morning when I leave, if I don't like plow on my brakes, my accelerator, I'm not going to get onto 116 from my driveway. And I see people taking chances down on 66 that they shouldn't be taking. And I worry about having more entrances on County Road 30, because I think 30 is even busier than 116.
I think that's the conversation of it does warrant either a temporary signal. It warrants access control, and that's why that whole conversation about access control, which could be temporary signals or a roundabout. So to your point, that's what the outcome of the feasibility study is. The county dictates, they get control of that, so they can say whether it's a roundabout or a signal, and we still have to work through that process. Either way, it's more than turn lanes. That's what's been identified. So that would address your point. Just one other anecdote that I've observed over the last 10 years, just even with Amazon and the amount of deliveries, the timing of some of these traffic and cul-de-sacs has changed. So if you have a long cul-de-sac, an Amazon driver for every house has to come back and forth by your house twice. I understand privacy, but if you have a nice private off-street that's not a main corridor, the Amazon driver keeps going. So that's just a personal anecdote with the way things are changing, and maybe it's not vehicles in 10 years and it's drones, I don't know. Somewhat scary, but the dynamic of traffic in terms of deliveries and the safety of what's there, it is always going to change. So we have to kind of think a little more broadly than just what it is today, and so that's what factors into some of these public safety things. That's my personal anecdote.
I don't know if this is for Natalie or Dwight, and I'm sure that I've read this somewhere, but could either one of you confirm for me, are these fees set by ordinance or fee schedule? And what's the process for deviation?
So our fees are set in our fee schedule, which is adopted by ordinance, so it's all kind of the same.
Adopted by?
Adopted by ordinance.
Oh,
Our
okay.
fee schedule is adopted by ordinance, and it's all set in our fee schedule. I know that sometimes there are cities that have programs that allow for a deviation impact fees. I believe Red Barn had asked for some impact fees to be waived, or at least postponed or paid over a longer time period. We, at that time, elected not to move forward with establishing such a program. So that would be at the direction of the council. I think there are options we could look into to either, probably what makes the most sense would be to have it payment over a period of years rather than completely waiving the impact fees. But there are implications to utility infrastructure, particularly when we do that. Kevin will probably speak to that more than I can.
Yeah, we usually, it's all set by our fee schedule. And if it's internal to the development boundaries and there's oversizing, we would credit up to what's eligible. One clarification that I don't know if the developer applicant could speak to is it just said reduce fees. Fees could mean a lot of things to me, so I don't know how to exactly answer that question because it could depend on the type of fee that they're asking for.
Does staff have a concern about setting a precedent?
I think that's why, I think for Red Barn, it wasn't that staff was opposed to looking at a program. I think especially for small businesses, that can be a very useful tool to help kind of split the payment up over a period of years. However, I would say the city needs to be prepared. Whatever we grant someone here, that someone else is going to ask for a similar treatment. So we should be, if we want to make this deviation, then we should want to be ready to make the people in similar positions.
Thank you.
And John, I think to what you were saying, I'm having trouble kind of figuring out, based on the applicant's letter, what exactly the scope of what the request.
They're present, we could
Yeah.
have them be
Let's
specific.
hear from council.
I can have one more question about the roundabout. So if they put a roundabout in, that would change the speed limit of County Road 32.
Only at the roundabout, if people obey the speed limit.
Right, but it's 55 now.
Yeah, but they
I don't
wouldn't
think we
change
could
it.
dictate the speed of
They wouldn't change it.
Could we?
Be a big roundabout.
It'd be similar to how a stop sign, so how like it's speed limit would be 55, but you hit a stop sign, you're gonna obviously slow down. So it's kind of a similar idea with a roundabout. So-
Notice she
I
said they
just-
don't stop at a stop sign.
I have, yes, exactly, I know. That'd be a yield.
I meant the speed limit.
I know what you
As you
meant.
approach the stop sign.
Right, but my point is a roundabout is going to back up traffic, because I deal with that every day too, where I work. And it does, it backs it up entire blocks. And so we have an issue now on 30, putting a roundabout in, to me, just isn't the right solution.
Which Councilmember Frieder, all these questions are valid. That's why the county is involved in what they allow and not allow, and there's more information that they would need us to provide. And when I say us, it would come through the development to our policies. So we don't have that answer now, but all of that gets evaluated, whether it's a temporary signal or roundabout. So
Don't we have to decide that to help the applicant now, though? Because that's part of the,
We would need-
process.
we would need to do
That's
more
part
study.
of what's going on with the delay in the
Okay.
application, is
Okay.
trying to figure this out. But more study was needed in terms of if we wanted to explore a temporary signal versus a roundabout.
We don't get to make that choice, do we?
So
Well-
there was information, I believe, in the packet that spoke to the options, and so
Yeah.
the county has stated they're open to a roundabout. So they mean that they've done at least a high-level look at the impacts of the roundabout. They may need to adjust timing in the signal or something, that's what they control. They also said that they're open to possibly a temporary signal, but to make that final decision, they need more information that we don't have yet. And so we're kind of in a stalemate because they won't give an answer without the information. And my presumption in the conversations I've seen with the applicant is they don't want to spend more money without a larger conversation. So that's where we're stuck
Okay,
with it.
thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Eric Hahn with Continental Properties. This is Connor Nett, also with Continental. Do we need to give an address or in this format? Okay. Well, we've been looking at this site with the Eberts for a number of years, and as you guys recall, we went through a number of iterations on each side of the county roads. So we reached out to staff following the feasibility study memo in March. There was a note in terms of the completeness regarding the signalization or the traffic improvements on the county road that we're talking about. So it didn't state necessarily that a signal was needed or a roundabout. We had budgeted for turn lanes, assuming that lanes would be sufficient for our use as a small piece of the puzzle. And we reached out upon, the general conclusion that staff here was supportive of a roundabout. The county, I guess at this point, the county's also said we would be okay with the roundabout. We're here to say that we cannot bear the burden of a roundabout. It's easily $6 million. So again, we had budgeted, we're here to signal that our budget is tapped with all of the infrastructure here and looking forward with capital markets where exit values are for multifamily. We can't continue. There's no way for us to bear that burden with the number of units that we have here or other participants immediately. And I guess in the realm of recapture, unless there was a no expiry and it went on forever with interest, that's the only way we could recoup the capital for that, or subsequent buyers or so on and so forth. So what we're signaling is that something has to give because this is our, we're coming up here to communicate that. And we communicated that in the email. Now, in terms of what we're saying, there's a limitation on value. Currently, in particular, we've taken assets to market in Oakdale. They're below replacement value. We know what replacement value is very well, and a $6 million roundabout is well above it. And I think we, at most, we could contribute maybe $700,000 tops to the intersection improvements, turn lanes, in some portion of a signal, but that's it, without modification of other parameters. Something's got to give. So I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add.
What other parameters?
Any cost parameters.
Like what?
We laid them out in the memo, so fee modifications.
Tell me here.
Sure. So, I mean, if we're going to fund a $6 million roundabout, we need to offset $6 million elsewhere in our budget. Either one solution could be more units. We don't know what the roundabout costs. So it's
I think that's why it said generally like fees.
Right.
Because in the memo, we outlined the offsite costs are 5.3 million. As they currently sit, fees are 4 million. So if you offset all fees, we wouldn't be at the value of a roundabout. Or if you offset all the roads, which is deviating from the Northeast District Plan, you would be close to the value of a roundabout. But there too, there's a lot of risk of a private development installing a public roundabout on a major county corridor. And that's something we've never done before. So that's where contributing our fair share is kind of where we sit, and trying to solve, everyone agrees that the traffic is a challenge, right? But trying to solve regional traffic at a project scale is extremely difficult.
Yeah, can you give us any additional details? I mean, this is, this isn't our business, it's your business, and you should have some solutions in mind.
Sure. I mean, at this point, our solution, so under normal pretenses, let's say we are one leg of four legs of the signal, we're paying for one leg of the signal and the associated turn lanes on one side of the street.
Okay.
And so in the realm of cost, a leg of the signal could be $150,000 to $200,000. The turn lanes we've already accounted for. So we don't have a solution for this regional traffic issue. We don't. So, I mean, short of funding from the city, if they want development here or some participation, there's no solution that we can offer on our own accord.
Okay, thank you.
So you're asking for funding from the city
For a regional traffic issue, we're not prepared to take on the problem that is a regional issue, especially to the tune of $6 million, when our normal offsites in this pretense would be less than $500,000.
Yeah, I get either.
I would say the other piece of it, that being like significant deviation from the Northeast District Plan, not connecting 122nd, looking at utility connections so we can kind of maintain connections back to the water tower, but not public roads. We could still provide, and even not private roads, just private internal drives for our residents, which is kind of typical of our community, but no public roadways, but still providing utility easements for necessary connections. But you start removing roadways, like 122nd or Road A, or both of them, that creates the funds needed for the other side of the, or for the signals.
I can think of a couple other instances where Continental has specifically experienced these regional traffic issues. One was in South Elgin, Illinois. They needed a bypass for two major arterials. The road cost there, again, this is 10 years ago, was $1.2 million. It was a collector bypass for emergencies at the intersection of Stearns and Randall Road. So there, it was going through a property as indicated by the county. So we built the road, but we offset the roadway costs that we couldn't bear and impact fees with the city in that regard.
You can't do that here.
Yeah, Illinois expressly authorizes transportation impact fees, so that's, we don't have that option.
It was a village fee, so it was their own tap fees, it was their connection fees.
Correct, but the state authorizes government entities to have that impact fee.
You can't do anything related to road transportation impact.
Well, exactly my point. We don't have the solutions for this cost issue. They're beyond our means.
Well, I'll just say, I like what you're trying to do, and I've read your communications. We're not in the finance business, and what we do for you, we're gonna be expected to finance for everyone else, so, you know, as it is, without some other, you know, creative solutions, I don't know if I could support this, and I want to support it.
I mean, it kind of feels like the obvious answer is you develop commercial at the same time, and then you're splitting the cost with the other half of this parcel as it develops. And that's what we asked for in the beginning when we went down this road 6 months ago. So I would circle back to that.
But the market isn't bearing that out.
Then maybe this isn't the time.
It has to start somewhere, and it starts incrementally, is what we've found. So that has been part of the dialogue with the city throughout the many attempts we've made, because we believe in this location. But at the same time, we have to run our business the way that we do. We are very careful with costs, very disciplined with costs, and in the case of Chaska, which we've discussed a lot with Jay, our community there, 280 units, was a portion of the $12 million solution. We didn't fund that $12 million roundabout. The city's participating. The DOT is it's an MDOT roundabout. So our entire community generates TIF increment as part of the funding. But in terms of our direct contributions, I think in that case they were quite different than in this regard. I think we're looking at the site with the number of connections that are part of the master plan and the county road. I mean, that consideration is fixed, especially with 610. I mean, that's not changing. What the city has the control over is what happens on private property and via the plan. And we're stating that the infrastructure burden here is too great for the number of units, which is what I think you guys all discussed with Mary Bujold. And, you know, short of probably, I guess I was trying to run the math on this for these connections and these improvements, you would need a lot of single-family units to support this sort of roundabout. A retail developer, it's going to further dissuade them from pursuing a site like this with those sorts of additional costs. So it's just, I think part of this is finding the fine-tuned solution rather than the perfect solution, because there isn't a perfect solution for this site. We've attempted many scenarios here. I think
I can offer a practical approach.
Sure.
I mean, very looking at it practically, like what can we do with what we have at the moment? If you remove 122nd, sorry, if you remove a road segment like that, we had agreed to turn lanes, I think that makes sense. We know we need that at peak hours. I think if we went out and the traffic, I believe, would show this, we're failing at peak hour, not all day, all night, which means if I'm trying to turn left at 7 a.m., it might be a challenge, and you will need to backtrack, potentially. You might need to backtrack to Bellwether, to 101st to go south. You would turn right out of that intersection. Our traffic consultant also thinks that might be unlikely, the time it takes to backtrack and go south versus just waiting for your gap and making the left turn, which can be difficult. It's unlikely. But I guess my point is, remove a segment of road like 122nd, creating capacity for more costs at the intersection. You can get your turn lanes. You're still preserving neighborhood connections. You're able to navigate north, turn south onto 101 in a safe manner, but also giving us time for commercial development. Ebert can't develop speculative retail at this time. If they put the roads in, it's building the Field of Dreams, but nobody would come, sort of thing. You just can't do it. So I guess going back to my point, a practical approach could be the turn lanes. If we get rid of 122nd, maybe it's enough to get in maintaining emergency access. I think we would want to do that. But you're creating capacity for the intersection, knowing that sometimes people might backtrack, but at the same time, it's a peak hour concern. At this time of day, you'd likely be able to make a left turn safely, and that's the big thing. And within the next 5-10 years, hopefully we have the roadway improvements. So just trying to work with the sticks we have to work with.
Just to
Looking at
clarify,
the
you're saying
map.
remove 102nd and no roundabout though, just.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
So that would be, so even removing 102nd wouldn't deal with the fact that we've identified that it needs to be a controlled intersection because of that failing turn movement.
What if it's a signal? How much is a signal compared to a roundabout?
Or a temporary signal.
Well, we still don't know if the county will accept a signal.
Yeah, we're at the
Right?
mercy
We
of
need
the
additional
county.
information to
Additional
present to the county before they can
Yeah.
accept that on their roads.
And what do they need to make that determination?
More accidents?
No, so there's more data that they asked for, but it would have to come from the development team, and at this point, the development team hasn't authorized us to move forward with that study, so that we can provide that to the county for that determination.
I would be comfortable
I was
with,
just gonna say, sorry, Commissioner Nichols, before, I guess it was probably a week before, Dwight had reached out to me about doing that additional study, and that's kind of when we put a pause on things. We knew we were at a point where we've evaluated what the overall cost was. We knew we were at the tipping point, and we needed to solve it. So before proceeding with those items, we wanted to have this conversation. So that's kind of where we are at, related to the
And
Thank you.
additional
Thanks
traffic
for
study.
sharing that.
Yeah.
And again,
That
the
makes-
county said they were okay with turn lanes. It's just,
Well,
we're trying to.
they're going to require turn lanes, they're okay with the roundabout, they're open to exploring the idea of an intersection,
Sure.
I'm sorry, the light, but we'd have to,
Yeah.
there's more study that we need to, there's more data they're requesting from us before they make a determination on.
So how do we connect
and the
those
one
two
up-
things? Like, how do we, what is the next step? Like, so they're not stuck waiting and we're like trying to figure out, well, what else can we do to help them? Because this solution seems like a good solution, because commercial's not developed there yet. So not extending that segment yet makes sense to me. You have the turn lane, right? 102nd of not connecting that to 30 right away.
So 102nd is in the northeast corner
Yep.
of the site.
Yep.
So that has nothing to do with the commercial. I don't think that removing 102nd, I don't know that that removes the, we'd have to do another study in terms of whether that
I was
changes the
confused if
intersection.
102 would actually save that much money, because it looks like you're using most of that for internal access. There's a little bit to the north, but it almost feels like you would get more bang for the buck from the Elm Lane being removed versus 102.
We agree with that. I think if you envision the wetlands being interconnected here, Elm Lane may have never been pursued. If you see what usable land you can, if you were to put single-family homes on the street or other uses that could pay for the road, it would make sense, but there's such a long stretch that is not funded by any actual real estate use. So that's kind of how we viewed this, but that is a key utility corridor. We recognize that. And I was going to mention that the county in their response said that I think they need to be compelled by a safer option than a roundabout, right?
Other way around. So when you talk about what needs to be done next, they would need to authorize us to proceed with that additional information to the county. The county stance is, they would allow, they view the roundabout as a safer alternative because it slows people down. So their stance is they would conceptually allow a roundabout, and through the signalization, they'd have to do more analysis to really keep that agreement. That's where we sit today.
And the other piece of, of the signal would be some sort of maintenance agreement with them, because their policies require the cities to pay for the maintenance of the signal. It's
Okay.
weird, but that's what they do.
Yeah.
So we would also then, if that was approved, have to have a conversation of how to handle the maintenance. That's a new conversation for us, but just adding that on there. So it's an extra ask to try to save money, and they're probably mostly considering it because they realize that they don't want to, they do need to make a future investment in this corridor. So
It feels like there's a lot of gates to clear still. I would be flexible on some of the road connections if that makes this possible. I would be flexible on the gateway signage. I might be somewhat flexible on landscaping along 30. But I would not be flexible around direct funding of any of the connections.
What
I don't know if council feels differently.
Jen, to some of that I do, the gateway time for sure. I'm open to exploring the connection changes, seeing what the impacts are. It sounds like there'd be additional studies that would have to be done to figure that out and see what the impact is to the county and the overall cost savings. Because to your point, does it actually save that much? We don't know. When you said landscaping, through what mechanism? Through just a variance?
I think Natalie said there's PUD flexibility.
I'm sorry.
PUD flexibility in terms of?
Yeah, they have proposed PUD benefits, that could be part of the discussion, is where could we be maybe lenient on satisfying some of that?
I'd be open to looking into it.
And public safety would have to weigh into, in terms of if we were to go down to a single access off of County Road 30 to serve 300 units, I think because we decided to not connect to Bellwether and we're not doing the Elm Lane connection, we're probably going to need a second connection at the very least, because it's 290 units that's going in.
Well, you'd have 102nd, and you would have the connection going through to 116 when Hunter's Ridge connects.
But I thought we were saying we were open to getting rid of 102nd.
No, I think it was Elm.
I think that was, maybe they misspoke, that Elm was more valuable in terms of cost savings than 102nd would be. Is that true?
Are we saying we're okay with foregoing Elm Lane altogether? Because I think that's a critical utility corridor.
They mentioned that too.
Or do we want to defer that to a future phase?
I think you would want to make the utility connection, but you wouldn't necessarily have to pave it at this phase.
And how are you going to get it to be paved when the future comes in? Because I feel like we're going to face this argument again saying, well, we don't need that to build our commercial.
Okay.
I was just providing clarity. I think we need to look at it to really see if removing Elm or removing 102nd would be more advantageous to create funds for something like a signal. The reason I had mentioned 102nd is that if you're looking at how to make alternative means to different county roads, 102nd puts you in the middle of the single-family neighborhood versus Elm kind of skirts you around to the clubhouse entrance of the Bellwether neighborhood and then over to 101st versus being very much in the center of the neighborhood. And for our uses, that 102nd Street, it's duplicative circulation at the moment. We could remove it, squish the two parking lots together, and it's no harm, no foul for our site. It still works fairly well, and we can have emergency access through the parking lot. So that's why I had mentioned that. Also very difficult to build a road through a wetland, and as Eric had mentioned, for Elm Lane. So we got to look at what could be more advantageous, and it'd be helpful if staff could look at that too and provide their feedback as well for how they think the circulation could be redone.
If you were to remove 102nd, and like you said, push those parking lots farther together, get rid of the setbacks, would you also be able to add more units within the existing footprint?
Maybe. Without looking at it,
There's
would that be a
creative
good
in
thing
your
or a
funding
bad
model.
thing? I don't know. In general, it gives us more space for separation, I think, so that could be a benefit, but yes, in general, if you remove a road, you could likely get more units.
I'd be open to entertaining either, depending on what works better. I don't know if others feel the
I'm
same.
open to
I'm
seeing
open to that too.
how it would work out, but I don't know what staff needs to.
Yeah, so I guess at this
what-
point, the
I
question
think you
is.
guys need to work together, but I don't know.
Well, one of the questions, that was my next question, is if staff's being asked to reevaluate the roadway connections on this parcel, are we looking at, this parcel with Oswald? Are we doing this at city council discretion, at city cost, or is this on the developer's cost? I need a little bit of clarification as to what the ask is for staff to complete, in terms of deviating from our plans to this
And I think if we're looking at making changes to benefit the developer, the changes are at the developer's request and cost, in my opinion, but.
So you're talking about the cost to perform the analysis?
Yeah, because I think we're being asked to reevaluate our internal transportation networks. So in terms of scope, is it just this property? and Oswald, I'm sorry, is it just this property, or are we also including Oswald when we're trying to make sure we're planning for changing our internal road network? A, B, at whose cost are we saying this is at? Is it the city cost, or is it the applicant cost? If we want to look at Oswald as well, it might be more arguably a city cost than it is the applicant.
How much would it be?
I don't know, I have about 7 weeks before I will likely not be at the city for 20 weeks, so we likely would need to have landforms to help lead this process, and then Stantec would likely be their cost as well, so we'd have to get scopes. I would say probably thousands of dollars. I don't want to over exaggerate, I don't know if it's 5 or 10, but I don't think, it's not something I'm going to be able to lead at this point.
Yeah.
Yep.
I would think it'd be at the applicant's cost in terms of whether or not Oswald would be included or not. Do we have enough information on that potential application to really?
You don't have a formal application.
Yeah.
No, but if we're getting rid of internal road connections that we've been showing, I would be tentative to do that without considering the Oswald connections into Bellwether, whether we're saying we want to get rid of those as well, or if those become even more necessary to have because we've removed a connection. I think, so that's my concern. If you can look at it on just a site, when we did the road network for the Northeast District, we looked at it as a regional master plan.
Can I just add one more thing? I feel like we're looking at so many different things and we're growing so quickly. I feel like if we have something that is a plausible possibility of something that can come in to help with our tax base, we should definitely be looking at it versus making it more difficult.
We're happy to look at it. I'm just trying to clarify.
Yep, and I'm not saying this towards staff. I'm saying as council, I think we need to make a decision. Do we want to put forth some effort to find out if this is a development that can come in and actually be a part of our community, help pay for some of the things that we have coming up in our city over the next 10 to 15 years? Or just say, no, this isn't going to work.
Means you're paying for road.
What this study looks like, just to determine if this is even a possible option is what we're trying to decide, if it's something that we want staff to look at.
Could staff bring back maybe an estimate at the next council meeting of what a study like that would cost? Is that possible? A ballpark?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a mini.
A mini Northeast
Yeah,
District.
it's like an update to the Northeast District, really, because
Yeah.
one thing has kind of a domino effect, but we want to be mindful of what that pivot point is and what it could do to kind of unintended consequences.
But wouldn't that be the applicant's responsibility to do that? Why would the city do that?
Well, I'm saying it's our responsibility too, if we would like a development to come in, to help us with growing our city, with more diverse things coming into our city to help pay for our tax base. So it's not all on the resident.
So, something to consider why it might be advantageous to the city is, as we've continued, this isn't the first time we've had some challenges in developing this corridor. And the applicant even stated that this is a regional problem that right now is on the shoulders of a particular developer. And so it does seem advantageous for the city to take another look at this because it has a regional impact. And so if we're establishing precedent, as we were kind of discussing previously, to Natalie's point, we want to consider what precedent we're talking about, and that precedent shouldn't necessarily be on the shoulders of one developer.
I mean, if we think we can incorporate it into the budget and handle it, I'm open to it.
Well, because this does impact the long range, when we're talking about this corridor, it's worthwhile to consider. It doesn't sound like it's necessarily going to be material, but staff has to do some analysis. It would probably make sense for us to pay for this out of our long-term fund, because it has a long-term impact in terms of trying to address the commercial, industrial.
I'd be open to that if we could get like just a general idea of this $5,000, is this
Like a not to exceed?
And how long it would take. I think we can do that. My hesitation is having it for you by September 10th, especially because that gives.
Or whenever works.
Okay, like we might be able to do
Yeah,
September
okay,
24th.
yeah.
I'm
I'd
just
work with the
concerned about
applicant.
getting it in the packet for September 10th.
Yeah, I think whenever works, talk to the applicant, whenever works, in terms of making sure the timing works all there. I don't see any reason it has to be on the 10th for us.
But does that, if we're trying to get to the ability to make a call in October, if we're not even gonna get the not to exceed by the end of September, do you want to just set a not to exceed now?
Do you have an idea of what that?
Could I make a recommendation, please? So typically, materiality, as we're looking at it, is $20,000. And coming out of the long-term fund, that would seem reasonable. I think we could communicate as we're doing analysis as staff, if it's going to exceed that and we're confident of that, we can reach out to council. But otherwise, that allows us as staff to move forward with an understanding of not to exceed materiality.
That works.
That's reasonable. Is there a
One more?
consensus?
I'll agree.
I like it.
And this is 100% paid by the city?
Long-term fund, in order to try and come up with a strategy for this corridor as this continues, the transportation issues continue to be a problem. And so, to their point, as a first mover, it's going to potentially open up some avenues for additional development. Until we solve this problem, any developer that comes in here, the burden of this regional transportation corridor is going to be beyond what any developer can carry alone.
Mr. Mayor, we need to probably move on.
So, just to clarify, do we need to add this to our regular agenda to get a motion in terms of moving forward for the not to exceed? Can we make that decision at a work session? Just process-wise, do we need to add it real quick to
I'll
our
wait
next
until our
meeting?
attorney gets to clarify that. We can get work direction, but I think
Okay.
that the distribution of funds, to your point, would have to be added.
Okay.
Should we cover that at staff reports? Do you want council to try to add an item?
Yes, please.
Anything else?
I move to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 We're adjourned.